Okay. Hello, I'm Bonnie Chang, a friend of Indivisible Lambertville-New Hope from across the river in Pennsylvania. Indivisible Lambertville-New Hope was looking for someone outside of Lambertville, aka someone who knows nothing about the politics in Lambertville, to moderate the Mayoral Forum. Having just come off conducting a similar session in our Doylestown Mayoral Candidate Forum, I was honored to be asked to help, and it is my pleasure to be part of your democratic process to help the voters learn more about your candidates vying to lead your wonderful city for the next 3 years. For this recording, we are interviewing Andrew Nowick, one of the two mayor candidates. There is a similar interview with Dave Del Vecchio. Both recordings will be made available to the public on Indivisible Lambertville-New Hope's website on Monday, May 10th. For the record, this mayoral candidate interview series is hosted by Indivisible Lambertville-New Hope. And the organization is not endorsing any candidate, but providing a public service. At this recording, the only people who are present are Andrew and myself and an ILNH person running the Zoom recording and keeping time. We will begin with a 2-minute candidate self-introduction and proceed with about 35 minutes of Q&As. Please note that neither candidate has seen these questions. We will end with a closing statement by the candidate after the Q&As. We have received about close to 60 questions submitted by many of you. We sorted, combined, and clarified some wordings and grouped them into 8 categories, and they are city finances, housing and development, specifically on affordable housing and development challenges, city buildings, library, city hall, and the police station, economic recovery, how to support the business community, Clawson Farm, of course, and community, about the civility and unity for the Lambertville community, leadership qualities, and vision. These represented the majority of the questions that are of most interest to the voters. We asked the candidates to keep their answers between 90 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on the question, so we can bring to the audience the most amount of information from this interview. And we apologize in advance if we cannot fit all the questions in this session. Andrew, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We are very pleased that you will be here with us for the next 40 minutes, basically going through a job interview. Without further ado, please take the mic for your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Bonnie. Also, thank you to everyone at Indivisible for sponsoring this event. It's much appreciated by myself and I'm sure by members of the community. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Nowick, and it would be my honor and my distinct privilege to serve as the mayor of Lambertville. My husband, Paul, and I have raised our 3 boys in this town, and we have a deep love for the community. I'm running for mayor because I believe the city needs a new kind of leadership, one that's based in openness and inclusion, one that recognizes diversity of thought as a strength and not a source of discord. I'm running for mayor because the community should have greater access to its leaders, and because leaders must provide greater accountability to the people that they serve. We need a leader who will show the public every last corner of the budget, how every one of your tax dollars is spent in maintaining our city. To that end, I will hold quarterly public meetings to do just that. Like many of you, I found it disheartening to hear the divisiveness that has crept into our civil discourse, and I think it's a symptom of our residents feeling frustrated that their voices are not being heard. And we must do better by these people. I believe we have a clear choice before us. Do we want to move forward with an open, inclusive approach to governing that brings our community together? Or do we want to return to the kind of top-down decision-making that has been the origin of some of today's most pressing and serious problems? And please, everyone should know this. If I'm elected mayor, I commit to being your full-time mayor. I will work at least 40 hours a week from City Hall. I will also spend time out in our community, talking with our residents and hearing their needs. have a lot of strong professional and civic experience to draw on as mayor. I know how to work with people and build consensus. That said, I'm not a career politician, and if you think it's what Lambertville needs, I'm not your guy. If you do believe, as I do, that Lambertville needs common sense, okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Andrew. We're going to start the Q&A session. Let's begin with something on everyone's mind, the health of the city finances. And please keep your answers to 2 minutes if you can. Please explain the current state of the city's finances in a way that citizens can easily understand. To the extent you believe there is a problem, what is your plan to address it?
Well, thanks. I think that the city does have financial issues at the moment, and I think that these have been a long time in the making. What we've seen since 2000 we've seen in the last 5 years of the Del Vecchio administration is a near doubling of the debt service that the city is obliged to pay. It's a major issue for the city in terms of affordability and budget difficulties. So we need to address that. We need to work toward correcting it. So what we've seen is that this almost doubling of debt in the last few years, and that has a direct impact on our taxes, on our ability to borrow more money, on our ability to kind of keep control of the operating budget, and so forth. So I think that this is a serious issue that needs a lot of consideration, and I think that it'll be one of the greatest challenges that the incoming mayor will face.
Okay, thank you. The current administration created the position of the business administrator and retained different professional services firms. Mm-hmm. Would you retain the position of the business administrator, and how would you manage the fees charged by the professional services firms?
Well, the business administrator position is an interesting one. I've done a little research, and I do know that as of 2019, this information comes from the New Jersey League of Municipalities. That as of 2019, of the 565 municipalities in New Jersey, 443 had some form of municipal manager. That included many municipalities that are smaller in population than Lambertville. Some of these business managers were either part-time, some were full-time, but it's widely considered a best practice for managing the day-to-day operation of the city, for cutting and finding and addressing inefficiencies and so forth. Because I'll be a full-time mayor, I'm not going to take a position on whether I will hire a business administrator right out of the gate. I think I need to get in there and sort of see kind of what the situation is. I know that the past administration, the Del Vecchio administration, did not have a business administrator, and that the fall administration did have a business administrator. But I think I'd like to reserve the right to kind of decide once I'm in there to what extent a business administrator would be necessary or helpful, whether part-time or full-time.
That's fair. Okay. Do you know how much of the funding appropriated through the American Recovery Act is coming to Lambertville? And what would be your plan to spend that fund?
I do not know to the answer to that question. I do think that it's very important that we are very proactive with our business community in terms of re-engaging and making sure that they have all the tools that they need to come out of the pandemic. And I think that there are a lot of fairly straightforward, simple ways to do that. Everything from, just kind of dressing up the area with flowers and making sure the trash gets picked up and things of that nature. So I think it will be a priority. I've talked to a lot of business leaders about kind of things that we can be doing in order to kind of not restart, but to kind of build on the success of the business community.
All right, great. Well, let's move on to the next category of questions, housing and development. Development is a major issue, and there are differing views in the city about how and where any development should occur. How would you define overdevelopment so that citizens can understand it? And is it a concern of yours? What is your vision for how Lambertville should manage growth?
Well, thanks. I think that's a terrific question, and I think it's been certainly something that's on people's minds as we move forward, as we consider kind of, how Lambertville will continue to kind of build out and move ahead. For me, the idea of overdevelopment is a little bit of a red herring, I have to say. I think that given that we're in 1.2 square miles and we are largely not entirely built out. We still have a couple of large businesses that have sizable properties, but for the most part, we're talking about small scale building developments, 2, 3, 4 units. And I think that we have to approach that in a very smart and systematic way. We certainly have planning board and the planning board to work with, and zoning regulations that are already in place. I think that will kind of prohibit any kind of large-scale development that may, that may even come up. I think that kind of smart development is important to the city. I look at a property that was developed on Church Street, a city property that was a parking lot, and was sold and developed into 3 very pretty houses. And that's the kind of development I think that we need more of, because that creates ratables. So those 3 particular houses are well worth, say $1.5 million, which will increase kind of the city's revenues through the tax base. So I do think that overdevelopment is an issue that people are talking about, but I don't really see it as a serious issue in Lambertville.
Okay. Now, if the police station lot is not redeveloped, what is your plan to meet the terms of our affordable housing court settlement?
Well, that's a very complex question. We would have to go back and I think the first thing that we would do would be to ask for an extension of the redevelopment plan there. I think that's a very viable place for affordable housing, and that would be my first. That would be the first thing I would do would be to ask for an extension on the on the court settlement for that property. If the court deemed that that was not in the best interest of affordable housing, then we would have to take another deeper dive into kind of looking at other sites in the city where we'd be able to meet our state mandated affordable housing requirements of 5 units. So I don't have a particular answer for that. I think where we are with the police station site is a good place, and I would like to see it proceed. And beyond that, I think that we would have to work as a community to identify other locations.
Okay. Now, how can we provide a range of housing options that help ensure that people and families of all ages and economic backgrounds can live here if they choose to?
Well, affordability is a big issue here in town, and I've talked to a lot of people at my meet and greets or just kind of out and about, and I think that people are concerned about affordability. It's something that is, it's something that's a big issue. It's something that's a real concern for people, whether it's somebody who's been living in a house for 50 years and whose real estate values are increasing along with their taxes, but it doesn't really matter to them because they're not going to be selling their house because they're going to stay in it. I think that there are broad concerns about affordability here in town. Some of what's been happening has been driven by demographics. We certainly have seen a rise in housing values, which is great for a lot of people, but it's not great for everyone who's trying to get into the community. So, certainly one of the things I would be interested in doing would be holding kind of town halls with experts, who are familiar with some of these affordability issues. Our values don't always get to intersect with policy. So in terms of affordability, there's only so much that a city municipal government can actually do. One of the things I do think that we need to do, which is very important, is to educate our people about, educate our residents about programs that are out there. One of the most interesting things that I found in the last little while on the New Jersey Department of Consumer Affairs site was that only 92 households in Lambertville actually in 2019 took advantage of the Senior Community Freeze program, which is a tax program that freezes seniors' taxes that meet eligibility. And what that says to me is that we only have 92 houses that meet that program, or that were in that program, is that perhaps we're not educating people well enough about some of these affordability issues. So I definitely think that we need to get out there. We need to be talking to people about ways in which they can take advantage of programs and have a broader conversation in the community.
That's a really good point, Andrew. Okay, let's move on to city buildings. Our city facilities, the police station, city hall, and the library are in dire need of repair. So what is your assessment of the cost benefit of repairing and upgrading them versus building new facilities? What is your preferred option for addressing this problem and why? And how would you fund that option? Sorry.
That's okay. It's a lot of questions in there.
I know.
Yeah, well, it's another one of probably the top 2 or 3 things that we're talking about all the time when I meet people, whether it's knocking on people's doors or we're in kind of meet and greet conversations. It's a very serious concern, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed in a very careful way, very systematically. So what we know is that we have not been taking care of our municipal properties. Currently, I believe we allocate about $25,000 to $35,000 a year for maintenance of all of our municipal sites, 95% of which is just simply cleaning. We have not looked after these buildings. We have not made them a priority, and it shows. You don't have to be a structural engineer to know that when you go up the library, it's a bad idea to grab the handrail, right? So anybody can walk around these buildings and sort of see some of the problems. What I know the city is doing is doing kind of a needs assessment at the moment, and I think that that's really critical. I think that information is going to be very important in terms of the scope of work that needs to be accomplished with these buildings, and how we're going to do it. Are we going to look at these? Are we going to look at all these buildings holistically? Are we going to pull them apart one at a time and look at them individually? I think we need a very measured approach. I don't think there should be any sort of lurching forward with these buildings. I think it's going to take time and a systematic approach to kind of get principally the information that we need before we make any decisions. So, it's hard for me to kind of commit to anything other than the process of being very thorough. I think that for me, one of the primary focuses of my campaign is community involvement. It's basically everything that I'm working toward in my campaign is this idea that the community needs to be involved. And my work on the community advisory team has been a perfect example of that. We have people who are working very diligently to take community values in respect to these buildings or other.
Yeah, well, I know you were talking about putting together a process and including the community to discuss the options, but specifically about the library. In its current state and current location, is it able to realize its full potential and meet Lambertville's needs as an asset to the community? And if not, what in your view would need to happen in order for the library to be on par with other town libraries? And what do you think about joining the Hunterdon County Library System?
Well, I think that the library, in terms of its size, is fine for Lambertville. I think that it's one of our most important community hubs. I think that from my point of view, I would certainly want to have some community feedback on this. I think the library is a gem. I think that we have some very serious issues that need to be dealt with there very quickly. 50 years, it's 1971, lead paint was banned in New Jersey, and today we still have a lead paint issue at the library. That to me is inexcusable. I think that we need to prioritize the library. We need to get out there and take care of repairing the porch. We need to take care of the lead paint remediation. We need to paint it. We need to bring it up to a place where we can begin to use it. I think that it's critical that we take care of our library. And I do think that it should remain our library. I don't see the need to necessarily expand it at this point. Certainly, if that's something that the community wants, I would put that to a referendum. I would suggest that we put that to a referendum. It's been a priority for Lambertville to keep its own library. And I think people are very proud of the city library. Whether or not we wanted to look at it in terms of a relationship with the county, I would not weigh in on that until we've had a lot of community feedback.
Okay, great. All right. Now let's move into economic recovery. Understanding that tourism is a major economic driver in Lambertville, what is your plan to help the small businesses in the city hurt by the pandemic to continue to make Lambertville an attractive tourist destination? How will you fund any business recovery efforts?
Well, I touched on this earlier, and maybe I misunderstood the previous question, but I think that we do need to get right into the central business district. I've talked with half a dozen business leaders in the last week or so, and there's a strong sense that they need that the business community needs more support from the city, administration, and some of that support is coming up with even just modest funds for for beautification, whether it's just planters. It's a great idea about from one business leader about having flags which identify businesses by color, which would give people kind of a long view down the street, and to work with the Chamber of Commerce to see what kind of marketing we can do. Lambertville has a long history of being a destination, absolutely, and I think that I would like to build on that, using the expertise of the business leaders and also the Chamber of Commerce. I think that we could be doing more marketing in terms of how the city can help. I don't know specifically what budget allocation we have for the business community, but I certainly think that we need to get in there and at least provide some basic services that are not being provided. We need to be picking up the trash on some days, and we need to be doing all of this minor beautification that's just really going to make a difference visually, a visual impact in the central business district. But really working with the chamber and hearing with really the diverse group of business leaders to see what their thoughts and ideas are. And I've heard some of those already.
Okay, good. Here's a question that may spur some more Pennsylvanians to come across the river. Would you be willing to support a marijuana dispensary in town?
This is not a new question for me, amazingly. Actually, or not amazingly, right? It came up at a meet and greet. I would want, and this is one of the ideas I've had to get out in front of this question, is having a town hall. I know that some of the other towns in New Jersey are grappling with kind of this very question. And I think that a cannabis dispensary, I think before I would commit to saying yes, I would want to have a lot of input from the community. I'd want to hear specifically from the zoning board. There's so many variables to that I think that we would need to have a lot more process before I could commit to it. I mean, obviously in theory it's legal, but we need to check in with the community in terms of whether it's appropriate for our small town, which has very little kind of space in terms of traffic flow and everything else that kind of comes with a dispensary that's probably going to bring in a lot of people into town. So I would take a cautious approach with this, and I would want to work with the city council and talk to the planning board, certainly well before I would commit to any kind of decision along those lines.
Sure, yeah, that's certainly prudent. Okay, let's talk about Clawson Farm. Do you support the property purchase? And if so, what do you envision as future uses for the property? And how will you implement that vision? And if you do not support the purchase, why not?
Well, when my family moved out here from New York about 16 years ago, we moved to West Amwell, and we specifically chose West Amwell because of its high preservation rate. It was almost 30% preserved in terms of farmland preservation and open space. That's a major it's a major priority for me personally, and Hunterdon County, I think, just really leads the way in terms of preservation efforts. I was on the Open Space Committee in West Amwell. I was a liaison between landowners and Green Acres and some of the nonprofits, really familiarizing landowners with the benefits of preservation, and townships. I absolutely 100% support the purchase of the Clawson Farm. I think it's certainly the best decision that we've made as a community in the last 5 years, let's say. I think it's an amazing property. I think 8.5 acres of the original 600 acre purchase by the Holcombs should be in public hands. And I think that the community is going to benefit enormously from it as we move forward. Absolutely, 100%. How it's used is a different question. So, I'm on the community advisory team, and one of the things that we'll be charged with, I think, is understanding public values as to what's the best use of the property. There'll certainly be an exclusionary zone with the farm market, but the city, with a lot of community input, needs to decide what is the most appropriate use of the property. I'm not going to weigh in with specific ideas. Certainly, it's got to be, the view shed has to remain. There's got to be complete public access to the property. We've heard a lot of terrific ideas from members of the community already on a wide variety of possibilities. So I think that we'll kind of wait and see. I would also say that I think that it's going to be important and notable that I think it's quite likely that we're going to see some of the costs recouped through preservation grants.
Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, now let's move on to a slightly different category. It's about safeguarding our community, the spirit of the community. Mm-hmm. Many people are concerned with the loss of civility in our politics and the increasing divisiveness in our community. What measures will you and your team/supporters do to focus on policies and address issues while maintaining a civil tone in the mayoral race and uniting the community after the election? And specifically, if you're elected, what will you do to help heal the city? And if you're not elected, how will you work with the new administration to help unite the community?
I think this is really, for me, one of the most important things that's in front of us right now. I think that that civility has really taken a hit in the last few years. We've seen a lot of incivility on the national level. I don't know whether that's trickled down or whether these whether these characteristics or trends are more of a local thing because people are so passionate about issues. I think part of the fundamental underlying problem with civility is that oftentimes people are frustrated because they don't feel as though they're being heard. So I would say that I think that it's very important. I pride myself in my conduct. I never say anything about anybody that I wouldn't say if that person weren't standing right next to me. And I have very specific ideas about how we can kind of bring the community together. So one of my ideas is for us to understand each other better by having neighborhood liaisons. So I would have liaisons from each distinct kind of geographical neighborhood in Lambertville. I would also have one from the Central Business District and the Spanish-speaking community, and all together, all 8 or 9 or 10 of us, or however many, would meet quarterly with myself to discuss kind of what issues are happening in our neighborhood, and to also make sure that people who don't have access to internet or other accessibility problems are their voice is represented. Because we know that sometimes if you live in one part of the town, if you live in Lambert's Hill, you're high up, but if you live in the south end of town, you're worried about flooding every time the river goes up. So I think that there are some very basic ways in which we can bridge the gap of understanding among people. I would also say that it's incredibly important for all members of the City Council and the Mayor to conduct themselves at all time with propriety and civility. And I would have very specific guidelines about public comments in City Council meetings. I would encourage people to speak to the issue, not the person. I would encourage people not to say "we," because "we" is a very nebulous term. You don't really get to speak for other people unless you write a petition and have people sign it. I think that there are a lot of very simple measures that we could encourage to increase civility in the city. I would also say that I think that unsigned opinions have no place in our civic dialogue. And I would also say that if I were elected mayor, I would continue to not use Facebook or social media as a platform for the city. I think that that's a very, I think that people, I don't have it for myself personally, and I think that when I saw it in the city life, I was very unhappy with how that went. So I think that there are a lot of things that we must do to kind of heal the city, to learn to speak to each other, to remember that when you go out, you're remembering people's best intentions, and that everybody has a voice, and that you really must listen to the person who's in front of you. If I'm not elected, I will happily volunteer in whatever way I can help.
Okay, great. Okay, now we're going into the category of leadership and priorities. And these are, we have like 4 little questions. So we ask you to actually respond within 90 seconds if possible.
Sure.
So what is the main concern you will address while you're in office? What would be your priorities once in office, for example, in the first 90 days?
In the first 90 days, I want to establish kind of what I've said in terms of community liaisons. I want to set a tone of graciousness and inclusivity. I want to make sure that people understand that I am here. I've told people that have already told me that they're not going to vote for me that the second thing I'll do if I'm elected is contact them. I think it's very important to begin immediately to have conversations with people who don't support you. It's very easy to reach out to your supporters. It's much more challenging and much more worthwhile to reach out to the people with whom you disagree. I will also, within the first month or so, schedule open public meetings for our budget. I think that accountability is very important. So I will be there accountable and accessible.
Great. If you're elected, what do you feel are the strengths that you bring to the office? And what do you feel are areas where you have more to learn?
Well, I think that we always have more to learn. There's no doubt about that. I've never run for political office, and while I do have some experience with budgeting through my church and through some of the things that I've done in the past, obviously, municipal budgeting is a complex thing, but I think that, you know, in that regard, I think in every regard, my values will drive policy and how I approach things. So, you know, getting back to, you know, I think having accessibility and inclusivity and openness will be things that I will bring that are so important to me in every way, because I really think without community involvement, you know, you don't go anywhere. So I do have things to learn. I've been listening to people talk for the last month, and I've learned a lot already about kind of the character and what people are concerned about. And I'll be rolling up my sleeves in there 40 hours a week with the professionals and with the city council and the city staff, soaking in as much as I can.
Okay. Are there things from the current administration that you really like and you like to keep them, and why? And are there things you would like to eliminate and why?
Yeah, there are some things that I think that have come out of the current administration that have been very positive. I think that, for example, the city website I think it's dynamite. There's a tremendous amount of resources there for residents and for people like me. You know, I don't have an in to the mayor. I don't have an in to everything that happens, you know, in city government at the moment, other than attending city council meetings, which I've done for the last year. Um, I think that, oh dear, I've forgotten what the question was.
Oh, you're talking about what would you keep and what?
Oh, right, yeah. So I certainly would keep that level of, I think, openness that the current administration has begun, which I think didn't exist in the previous administration, and I would expand on that. I think that that's really, really important. I also would I would definitely keep a hybrid Zoom version for city council meetings. That's another thing that's accessible. You know, accessibility is an issue, I think, when you have you know, a mother who wants to attend city council meetings but has to, you know, make dinner for her kids. Being able to set up being able to set up the Zoom on the kitchen counter and kind of, you know, join in is a great thing. So, you know, there's a couple of things I think that we've done well in terms of having honest, open conversations. In terms of things that I probably wouldn't want to keep, I think that we need more attention. I think the current administration has not paid enough attention to the day-to-day issues that face our cities. You know, I think our public works department needs more care. I think we need more regularity with you know, things like plowing and street sweeping and trash. I think that we need to be paying more attention to, you know, some of these daily bread and butter issues, which are so important to people. And I don't think that the current administration has done a great job of that all the time. And I would like to build back time.
Okay. And one last question, as I mentioned before, this is almost like a job interview, right? So we have one of these, you know, very standard questions. Mm-hmm. How have you tackled tough problems in the past, and what did you learn from those?
Well, tackling tough problems is always a challenge, right? So I think what you have to do is you have to step back and take a breath and identify the scope of the problem, and then begin to consider options for working through it. I think that so much of kind of what I will be facing as the mayor are problems, right? I'm going to be stepping into a very, in some ways, fractured community where there are serious problems of budget and infrastructure. I think that what I've learned is that when you step back and you really, really think through things, that you begin to see a way out. And it's okay to ask for help. I think it's very okay to ask for help or other viewpoints and perspectives when you're trying to work on a problem, because sometimes you're so deeply into the problem itself that you don't always you don't always see the way out right away. So you step back, you do your best to analyze it, you bring people in, and then you begin to kind of deal with it systematically and thoughtfully and thoroughly with an eye toward what your goal is.
Okay, great. Well, time flies. We are now going to ask Andrew the last question, which is your vision. So what do you envision the city will be like, and what will be said about you after your first term?
I think that the city will, I think that the city will settle down a little bit, quite honestly, in a lot of ways, in terms of its tone, in terms of its disappointment with inaccessibility to city government. I think that I'm going to put so much work into this that I'll be able to really bring the community in. I mean, one of the things that I've done in my meet and greets is asked people if they would consider volunteering for the city 2 to 3 hours a month. And I've already got 50 people who are committed to volunteering 2 to 3 hours a month. They've signed up, they've given me their names and their phone numbers. And so I think that what I envision is a community that's more engaged across the board with a budget, with helping out, with and I think that we can be more engaged with each other in fun ways as well. I mean, I would love to see a community day in Lambertville. I think that there are lots of things that we could be doing. You know, somebody wrote on like, what's your biggest issue? They wrote, we don't have enough fun. I would love to see us have more fun. I think within 3 years, I would love to see a farmer's market downtown in one of the parking lots on a Saturday or Sunday morning. I would love to see us begin to really dig into kind of some of the climate issues that are going to be before us. I would love to see electric charging stations, dot the city. 35% of sales every year increasing in electric vehicles. I think that there are a lot of simple things that can be done in the next 3 years, and I think that there are a lot of complex things that have to be done. So a lot of little ideas, beautification, beginning to think about kind of long-term goals, civility, community building, and engagement. Those are all things that I think will happen in the next 3 years if I'm elected.
Wow, I'm sure everybody will agree. Being the next mayor of Lambertville is definitely not a walk in the park. Lots of issues that you have to deal with. And before we close, I know you sort of have, in your vision question, you sort of have given a summary of your vision and what you would like to do, but we want to give you another minute to summarize, like if there's anything else you would like to share with the people who will be viewing this recording.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, and thanks for your time tonight, or this afternoon, or tonight, whenever it is in Zoom land. I very much appreciate it. For me, I'm not a politician. I've been very devoted and committed to this community, and will continue to be, regardless of what happens on June 8th. For me, community involvement is the cornerstone of everything. For us to get together, to be together, to work together, to live together is key. And it's the thing that is most important to me. I think also, integrity is important. I think our personal conduct is important. I think bringing people in and hearing what they have to say and making sure that you're actually listening, even if you end up disagreeing at the end, is very important. Consideration, important. There's so much about this community that I love and that I want to just see kind of brighten up and develop even into kind of a deeper, more positive place.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Andrew, for addressing all these questions to help us better understand how you plan to be the champion and steward for Lambertville. For the audience who are watching this recording, if you have any further questions for Andrew, please feel free to contact him and his campaign. And if you have feedback for Indivisible Lambertville-New Hope, please contact the organizers via their email, which is info@indivisiblelnh.com. Again, for the audiences who are watching this recording, thank you for participating in this process to be an informed voter. And best of luck to you, Andrew, in your race to become the mayor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Last but not least, a big shout out to the leaders of the Indivisible Lambertville-New Hope for organizing this event. What a wonderful civic service you're providing. To the audience, I hope you found this session with Andrew very informative and hope you'll also watch the session with Dave Del Vecchio. And bye for now.